I never planned to become the villain in someone else's story. But when you're backed into a corner with nothing left to lose, sometimes the only way out is through the wall. Or in my case, by becoming the landlord of the very people trying to destroy me. The day I signed the property deed to Pinnacle Innovations headquarters was the sweetest victory I'd ever tasted. The looks on their faces when I walked through those glass doors, not as Margot Reynolds, the disgraced marketing director they'd tried to force into resignation, but as Margot Reynolds, the owner of the building they occupied, was worth every penny of my inheritance, and then some. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began. 12 years of my life. That's what I'd given to Pinnacle Innovations, rising from junior copywriter to marketing director through sheer determination and talent. I'd helped transform a struggling tech consultancy into one of the most sought-after firms in the industry. My campaigns had won awards. My strategies had doubled our client base in just 3 years. I'd sacrificed weekends, relationships, and probably a small piece of my soul for this company. And how did they repay me? By trying to push me out the door the moment Alexander Webb stepped in as the new CEO. Webb was brought in by the board to modernize operations and inject fresh perspectives. Translation, he wanted to install his own people in key positions. People like Diane Holloway, his former colleague who suddenly appeared as our new Chief Innovation Officer. A position created specifically for her that somehow required her to oversee my department. It's not a demotion, Margot. Webb had assured me with that plastic smile that never reached his eyes. You'll still be marketing director. Diane will just help align our messaging with our new strategic direction. I wasn't born yesterday. I recognized a slow-motion firing when I saw one, but I wasn't about to go quietly. I understand completely, I'd replied with an equally insincere smile. I look forward to working with Diane. That was the first lie in what would become a chess match of deception. The undermining began subtly. My meeting invitations were accidentally overlooked. My project proposals were perpetually under review. My team members were gradually reassigned to Diane's pet projects. The message was clear. Make yourself obsolete or make yourself gone. I documented everything, every email, every meeting, every reassignment. When HR mysteriously lost my performance reviews from the past 5 years, reviews that had consistently rated me as exceptional, I simply produced my own copies. Those could have been altered, Diane suggested when I confronted her and Webb in a closed-door meeting. Are you accusing me of forgery? I asked, maintaining perfect composure while my blood boiled. Of course not, Webb interjected smoothly. But you have to understand, Margot. The company is evolving, some people evolve with it, and others find themselves pushed out despite their contributions and institutional knowledge. I finished for him. Webb's jaw tightened. Nobody is pushing you out. Another lie? But I smiled again. Good to hear. I left that meeting knowing I had 2 choices: resign with some semblance of dignity, as they clearly wanted, or fight in a battle where they controlled all the weapons. Or so I thought, until I received the call about my great-aunt Beatrice's passing. Aunt B had been the black sheep of the family, unmarried, childless, and fiercely independent. She'd made a fortune in real estate during the 1980s boom and had always treated me as the niece who had her head screwed on right. We'd lost touch in recent years as her health declined, so the call from her attorney came as a complete surprise. Ms. Reynolds, your aunt has left you the entirety of her estate, including her real estate holdings, the attorney informed me. The approximate value is just over $28 million. I nearly dropped the phone. $28 million? That couldn't be right. There must be some mistake, I said. No mistake. Beatrice was quite explicit that you were to be her sole heir. She admired your independence and drive, qualities she valued highly. As the reality sank in, something shifted inside me. For the first time since Webb's arrival, I felt a spark of power. Options I'd never considered suddenly materialized before me. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled up the property management company that handled Pinnacle's office lease. A plan was forming, one that would either be the most brilliant revenge or the most spectacular failure of my life. It took 3 weeks of research, 4 meetings with financial advisors, and one very intense negotiation with the property owners. But I did it. I purchased the building where Pinnacle Innovations had its headquarters. I did it through a shell company. Of course, Reynolds Property Management, LLC, generic enough to raise no eyebrows. The current building management company was retained, with the understanding that I would be making certain decisions personally. Meanwhile, at work, I played the part of the gradually defeated executive. I stopped fighting the reassignments. I nodded agreeably in meetings. I even started taking long lunches and leaving precisely at 5 o'clock, behaviors that Webb and Diane noted with satisfied glances. Margot seems to finally be accepting the new reality. I overheard Diane tell Webb one afternoon, "Maybe we won't need to proceed with the performance improvement plan after all." The performance improvement plan was corporate speak for the paper trail they were creating to justify my eventual firing. Little did they know, I had plans of my own. 2 months after acquiring the building, I made my first move. An email went out to all tenants announcing a modest 5% increase in parking fees, effective immediately. Not enough to cause an uproar, but enough to irritate Webb, who I knew negotiated fiercely on such matters. Sure enough, he stormed into our next executive meeting, fuming about highway robbery and contractual limitations on increases. "Has anyone looked into whether this is even legal?" he demanded. Our CFO, Thomas, nodded wearily. "I've reviewed the lease. Unfortunately, the parking facilities are considered separate from the main building lease, and the agreement does allow for reasonable fee adjustments with 30 days' notice." Which we received, added Diane, looking annoyed. "It's only 5%, Alexander, hardly worth the blood pressure spike." Webb glared at her. "It's the principle. What's to stop them from raising it 10% next month? 20%? We need to push back." I sat quietly, taking notes as if this discussion was of minimal interest to me, while inwardly relishing every word. Webb insisted on meeting with the building management company. I made sure I was conveniently scheduled for a dentist appointment that day. The report that filtered back was that Webb had been, firmly but politely, informed that the increase was well within the terms of the lease agreement, and that the new ownership was simply adjusting rates to match market standards. My next move was more strategic. I commissioned a building-wide energy efficiency assessment that required access to all offices after hours. Nothing would actually be changed. This was purely reconnaissance. I wanted to know exactly what was happening inside Pinnacle when the executives weren't around. What I discovered was gold. Despite the company's public commitment to sustainability, they were running servers 24/7 in a makeshift data center that violated several building codes. Moreover, they'd modified certain office spaces without proper permits, including knocking down a non-load-bearing wall to create a larger office for Webb. I documented everything, but took no immediate action. These were cards to be played at precisely the right moment. Meanwhile, the noose at work continued to tighten. My team had been reduced to 2 junior marketers who looked at me with pity. My office, once centrally located near the executive suite, had been relocated to a corner of the building with a lovely view of the dumpsters. My budget had been slashed by 60%, making it virtually impossible to launch any significant campaigns. "We're focusing our resources on more innovative approaches," Diane explained during a budget meeting, not even bothering to hide her smirk. I nodded pleasantly. Of course, innovation is key. The following week, all Pinnacle employees received an email from building management announcing upcoming renovations to enhance tenant experience and property value. The renovations would begin with the West Wing, precisely where my sad little office was located. "You'll need to temporarily relocate," Webb informed me, not bothering to mask his satisfaction. "Given our current space constraints, we've set up a workspace for you in the storage area near the break room." The workspace was a metal desk wedged between filing cabinets and forgotten office equipment. There was no window. The fluorescent light flickered, and the constant hum of the vending machines provided a maddening soundtrack. "This is unacceptable," I said firmly. standing in the doorway of Webb's expansive corner office. He barely glanced up from his computer. It's temporary. Margot. The renovations should only take... What did they say? 8 to 10 weeks? I can't work effectively in a storage closet for 2 months. He finally looked at me, his expression one of practiced concern. I understand it's not ideal, but these renovations are beyond our control, and we're working with limited space. Unless, of course, you feel this might be an appropriate time to discuss other arrangements for your future. There it was, the push I'd been waiting for. He was expecting me to resign rather than endure this humiliation. Instead, I smiled. No need, I'm sure I can manage for a few weeks. His disappointment was almost comical. The next day, I called in sick, my first sick day in 3 years. Instead of staying home, I went to my attorney's office and finalized the next phase of my plan. That afternoon, Pinnacle received a formal notice from Reynolds Property Management, LLC, citing multiple lease violations, including unauthorized structural modifications, improper use of space for data storage, electrical system modifications without proper permits, after-hours energy usage exceeding contractual limitations. The notice demanded immediate compliance within 30 days or facing substantial penalties, potentially including lease termination. I returned to work the following day to find the executive floor in chaos. Webb had called an emergency meeting of all department heads. I wasn't invited, of course, but Sarah from accounting texted me updates throughout. Webb is losing it, she wrote. Never seen him so red-faced. Keeps saying the building owners are trying to extort us. I settled into my storage room office and quietly continued my work, waiting for the inevitable. It came 3 hours later. Webb's assistant appeared at my door, looking harried. Alexander wants to see you immediately, she said. I took my time gathering my notepad and straightening my blazer before following her to the executive conference room. Inside, Webb sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the other department heads. Diane was at his right hand, looking equally agitated. Margot, Webb said with forced pleasantness. Thank you for joining us. We're dealing with a situation regarding our lease, and I recalled that you mentioned having some experience with commercial real estate through a family connection. I kept my expression neutral, hiding my amusement at how quickly I'd transformed from persona non grata to valuable resource. My great-aunt was in real estate. Yes, I said carefully, though I wouldn't claim expertise. But you understand leases, contracts, that sort of thing. Webb pressed. I nodded. I've picked up some knowledge over the years. He pushed a document across the table, the notice from Reynolds Property Management. We need someone to liaise with these people, he said. Someone who speaks their language but represents our interests. Our legal team is tied up with the Westbrook acquisition, and frankly, this requires a diplomatic touch. Translation: they needed someone expendable to deal with the angry landlord. I'd be happy to help, I said, accepting the document as if seeing it for the first time. Though I'll need full details on these alleged violations. Alleged is right, Diane scoffed. That wall we removed was nothing structural, and every tech company runs servers. It's absurd. Nevertheless, I said, if we want to resolve this, I'll need complete information. Webb nodded. Thomas will get you whatever you need. Just handle it, Margot. Make it go away. I'll do my best, I promised, already planning my next move. Over the next 2 weeks, I played both sides masterfully, if I do say so myself. To Pinnacle, I was the dedicated employee working tirelessly to negotiate with the difficult, new building owners. To my property management company, I was the owner insisting on strict compliance with the lease terms. I scheduled multiple meetings with Reynolds Property Management representatives, which were actually meetings with my attorney or simply time spent working from a coffee shop. I provided Webb with detailed progress reports that suggested incremental movement while emphasizing the property owner's surprising inflexibility. They're being completely unreasonable, I told Webb after a particularly lengthy negotiation session. They're demanding we restore the wall in your office and completely relocate the server room. At our expense. Webb pounded his fist on his desk. That would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not to mention the operational disruption, I added helpfully. I tried explaining our position, but they seemed determined. What are our options? He demanded. I pretended to consider. Well, we could fight it legally, but that would be expensive and time-consuming with no guaranteed outcome. We could comply, though, as you note, that's prohibitively expensive. Or what? We could consider relocating. Our lease is up for renewal in 8 months anyway. Perhaps an early negotiated exit would be best for everyone. Webb stared at me, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. Relocating would be complex. But if these people are going to be this difficult to work with moving forward, I nodded sympathetically. Exactly my thinking. By the end of the month, Webb had tasked me with quietly exploring alternative office spaces. The irony wasn't lost on me. The executive they'd been trying to force out was now spearheading a critical project. My status in the company subtly shifted. I was moved out of the storage room and into a temporary office that, while not as nice as my original space, at least had windows. Diane suddenly found reasons to consult me on various matters. My team members were gradually returned to my supervision. All the while, I continued to tighten the screws as the building owner. Minor but irritating issues began to plague the Pinnacle offices. The elevator to the executive floor would mysteriously be out of service for days at a time. The HVAC system would unexpectedly switch from cooling to heating. Water pressure in the executive washrooms became unreliable. Each problem was eventually resolved after multiple complaints, with building management always blaming ongoing system upgrades or scheduled maintenance that somehow never appeared on any distributed schedule. 3 months into this game, I decided it was time for the final act. I had Webb exactly where I wanted him, frustrated with the building situation, increasingly dependent on my assistance, yet still planning to push me out once the office relocation was complete. I scheduled a meeting with him, ostensibly to discuss the top contenders for our new office space. But when I arrived at his office, I came with a different agenda. Before we discuss the relocation options, I said, placing a folder on his desk, I thought you should see this. Inside was a formal letterhead from Reynolds Property Management, LLC, with an unexpected offer. A 5-year lease renewal for Pinnacle Innovations at a 15% reduction in current rates, with tenant improvement allowances for any necessary renovations. Webb stared at the document in confusion. This doesn't make sense. They've been making our lives miserable for months, and now they want to offer us a discount to stay. I shrugged. Apparently, the commercial real estate market is softer than expected. They'd rather keep a reliable tenant at a reduced rate than risk the space sitting empty. And all those violations they were so concerned about? They're willing to work with us on a reasonable timeline for addressing them. Nothing immediate or disruptive. Webb leaned back in his chair, suspicious. What's the catch? No catch that I can see. It's actually an excellent offer, better than any of the relocation options I've found. We'd be saving nearly $2 million over the 5 years compared to our current rate. He tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. And you've vetted this thoroughly? Of course, I've had multiple conversations with their representatives. Not technically a lie. Let me discuss it with the board, he said finally. This could change our plans significantly. Of course, I replied smoothly. Oh, and there is one more thing. The owner of Reynolds Property Management would like to meet with you personally to finalize any agreement. Apparently, this is their policy for major tenants. Webb nodded absently, already calculating the financial implications. Fine. Set it up. I scheduled the meeting for the following Friday at 3 p.m., late enough in the day that most employees would witness what was about to happen, but not so late that people would have left for the weekend. When Friday arrived, I dressed with particular care. A perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, crisp white blouse, and the Louboutin heels I reserved for special occasions. I wore my grandmother's pearls and styled my hair in a sleek chignon. power dressing at its finest. I spent the morning working normally, giving no indication that anything unusual was about to occur. At 2:30, I watched from my office as Webb and Diane prepared for the meeting. They'd arranged for coffee service in the main conference room and had their presentation about Pinnacle's commitment to being a quality tenant ready to go. At precisely 2:55, I stood, gathered a leather portfolio containing certain documents, and walked calmly to the conference room. Webb and Diane were already inside, along with Thomas from finance and our legal counsel. Patricia. Margot. Webb acknowledged with a nod. The building owner should be here any minute. I want you to sit in since you've been handling the negotiations. Of course, I replied, taking a seat across from them. At 3:00 p.m. sharp, Webb's assistant appeared at the door. Sir, the representative from Reynolds Property Management is here. Webb stood, straightening his tie. Send them in. The assistant stepped aside, and everyone looked toward the door, expecting a stranger to enter. Instead, I simply opened my portfolio and removed the final document I'd been waiting to present. That won't be necessary, I said calmly. The owner of Reynolds Property Management is already here. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me in confusion. I slid the document across the table to Webb, the deed to the building with my name clearly listed as the owner. I believe you wanted to meet with the building owner, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Well, here I am. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Webb's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, dawning horror as he realized the implications. This is some kind of joke. He finally managed. I assure you, it's not. I replied. I purchased this building 4 months ago through my company, Reynolds Property Management, LLC. Every lease violation notice, every maintenance issue, every negotiation, that was all me. Diane had gone pale. That's not possible. Oh, but it is, I said, unable to keep a slight smile from my lips. My great-aunt Beatrice left me a considerable inheritance. I decided to invest it in real estate, specifically, this building. Webb's shock was morphing into anger. This is a conflict of interest. It's unethical. I raised an eyebrow. Is it? There's no company policy preventing employees from making private investments. I checked quite thoroughly, and I've been completely transparent in my role as the building owner, just not about my identity. Thomas, always practical, was examining the deed. This appears legitimate, he said quietly. Webb snatched the document from him, scanning it frantically as if searching for evidence of forgery. Why? He finally demanded, looking up at me with fury in his eyes. Why go through this elaborate charade? I met his gaze steadily. Because you and Diane have spent the past 6 months trying to force me out of a company I helped build. You reassigned my team, slashed my budget, relegated me to a storage closet. All to avoid the messiness of firing someone without cause. Patricia, our legal counsel, winced visibly at this accurate assessment. So yes, I continued. When the opportunity presented itself to purchase this building, I took it. And when you demonstrated such concern over lease violations and building issues, I made sure to give those concerns the attention they deserved. This is outrageous, Diane sputtered. The board will what? I interrupted. Fire me. I imagine that's coming anyway. But it won't change the fact that Pinnacle Innovations now answers to me as their landlord. And while I've offered very generous terms for a lease renewal, I could just as easily decide not to renew at all. Webb's face had turned an alarming shade of red. This is blackmail. No, I corrected him. This is business. Something you taught me quite effectively over the past 6 months. I stood, gathering my portfolio. I'll leave you to discuss the lease offer. It expires in 48 hours. After that, we revert to standard market rates, which, I should mention, are trending upward quite aggressively in this area. I walked to the door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Webb? That wall in your office needs to be restored by the end of the month. Building codes, you understand. The story of what happened in that conference room spread through Pinnacle like wildfire. By Monday morning, everyone knew that Margot Reynolds owned the building and had been behind the mysterious issues plaguing the executive team. I arrived to find a bouquet of flowers on my desk, sent anonymously. But I suspected they were from Sarah in accounting, who had texted me a series of exploding head emojis on Friday afternoon. Webb avoided me entirely, barricading himself in his office for most of the day. Diane, ever the survivor, attempted to rewrite history by stopping by my office with a too bright smile. Margot, I've been meaning to discuss the Anderson campaign with you. I think your original concept had a lot of merit that we should reconsider. I smiled politely. Thank you, Diane. I'll have my team prepare a presentation. By Wednesday, reality had set in for the executive team. The lease renewal offer, with its significant savings, was too good to refuse, especially with commercial real estate prices rising. The board, concerned primarily with financial outcomes, directed Webb to accept the terms. The agreement was signed in another conference room meeting, this one considerably more subdued than the last. Webb signed with a grim expression, barely meeting my eyes. Excellent, I said, accepting the document. Pinnacle Innovations will remain our valued tenant. I trust our professional relationship will be productive moving forward. The threat was clear. I could make their professional lives very difficult if they chose to continue their campaign against me. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation. As satisfying as it was to watch Webb and Diane tiptoe around me, I had no interest in remaining at a company where I was merely tolerated out of fear. Besides, I had other plans. My resignation letter was brief and professional, giving the standard 2 weeks' notice. Webb accepted it with poorly disguised relief, though that relief was tempered by uncertainty about what I might do as their landlord once I was no longer their colleague. On my last day, I sent a company-wide email announcing that I was leaving to establish my own marketing consultancy. I thanked everyone for 12 wonderful years and invited them to a farewell happy hour at a nearby restaurant. The turnout was impressive. Nearly every employee except Webb and Diane attended. Many expressed genuine regret at my departure and interest in my new venture. "Will you still be our landlord?" asked Thomas, who had loosened up considerably after 2 glasses of wine. I smiled. Absolutely. Reynolds Property Management has a diverse portfolio now, but this building remains special to me. Sarah from accounting leaned in conspirationally. The executive floor has been like walking on eggshells since they found out. It's amazing. Just good business, I replied with a wink. 6 months later, my consultancy was thriving. I'd secured contracts with 3 of Pinnacle's former clients, companies that had worked directly with me and followed when they heard I'd established my own firm. I maintained a strictly professional relationship with Pinnacle as their landlord. All building maintenance was performed promptly and properly. No mysterious elevator outages or HVAC issues occurred. I even approved their request to renovate the reception area, though I did insist on reviewing the permits personally. 1 year to the day after I revealed myself as the building owner, I received an unexpected message from Webb's assistant. He wanted to schedule a lunch meeting, off-site, just the 2 of us. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. We met at an upscale restaurant downtown. Webb looked tired, the past year having added new lines to his face and gray to his temples. After perfunctory small talk about the weather and the restaurant's acclaimed chef, he got to the point. "I want to apologize," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "The way I handled your position at Pinnacle was unprofessional and unfair." I raised an eyebrow, saying nothing. He continued. "The board has asked me to step down. Effective next month, I'll no longer be CEO of Pinnacle Innovations." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, not entirely insincerely. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, you're not. But thank you for saying it." He took a sip of water. "The company has underperformed since you left. We've lost key clients, and morale is at an all-time low. Diane resigned 3 months ago." I nodded, having already heard this through my still active network of contacts at Pinnacle. "The board is considering several candidates for my replacement," Webb continued. Your name has come up. This genuinely surprised me. I'm not interested in returning to Pinnacle. I thought you might say that, but I felt obligated to mention it. He paused. You outplayed me, Margot, completely and thoroughly. It wasn't a game to me, I replied evenly. It was my career and my dignity. He nodded slowly. I understand that now. Too late, obviously. The rest of the lunch passed in surprisingly civil conversation. As we prepared to leave, Webb asked the question I'd been expecting. What will you do with the building once I'm gone? Will you continue as Pinnacle's landlord? I smiled. Actually, I've had an interesting offer from a holding company looking to acquire properties in this area. I'm considering selling. His eyes widened slightly. Any idea what they plan to do with it? They mentioned something about converting it to mixed-use residential and commercial space. Apparently, the tech office boom is cooling, and luxury condominiums are the next big thing. Webb paled visibly. That would mean that Pinnacle would need to relocate. Yes. When the lease expires, of course. I would never terminate early. He stared at me, trying to determine if I was serious. I maintained an expression of mild interest, giving nothing away. Finally, he nodded. Well, it's your building. You can do what you want with it. Yes, I agreed. It is. We parted ways outside the restaurant with a handshake that felt like the closing of a chapter. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the board chairperson of Pinnacle Innovations, practically begging me to consider taking the CEO position. I declined politely but suggested several qualified candidates from my professional network. As for the building, I had no intention of selling it. The offer was real, but I derived too much satisfaction from being Pinnacle's landlord to give that up. Still, letting Webb believe his actions might result in the company losing its headquarters seemed a fitting final note to our relationship. My great-aunt Beatrice would have approved. She'd always said the best revenge isn't just success. It's success with property. Because at the end of the day, no matter how high you climb on the corporate ladder, the person who owns the building always has the final say. Some people collect art. Some collect cars or watches or rare wines. Me. I collect buildings. My portfolio now includes 3 commercial properties, including Pinnacle's headquarters. I visit occasionally, walking through the lobby like any other visitor, nodding politely to the security guards who have no idea I sign their paychecks. I take the elevator to the top floor and look out across the city, remembering the storage closet where they tried to break my spirit. The corner office that once belonged to Webb is now occupied by the new CEO, a brilliant woman who previously ran a successful tech startup and who has brought new energy to Pinnacle. Under her leadership, the company is finding its footing again. When their lease comes up for renewal next year, I'll offer them fair terms. Business is business, after all. But I'll never forget the look on Webb's face when he realized who really held the power. In the corporate world, they tried to write me out of the story. Instead, I bought the whole damn book. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's owning the building where your enemies work and charging them rent for the privilege